Hi, and welcome back to Filmmaker Central. I'm Kerry Garrison, and today we're going to take a look at Fusion. And while we've done a lot of kind of introductory stuff to Fusion, I've still had a lot of questions on how to get started, how to learn the different tools, where to find them all. So we're going to give kind of another getting started with Fusion and kind of go about how to figure out more of the tools and what they do and how they relate to each other. So stay right there. We'll be right back. Okay, so I'm here in Fusion and I've got a basic 3D scene going, and you want to add some effect to it, but you don't really know what all the tools are. And to be honest, it's a little daunting to try and figure out. And right now, especially with version 16, there's really no good documentation within the Resolve manuals. So the best thing I say to do is to get the tools reference from Fusion 9. It is almost all there. There's a few new things, but you don't really need to worry about those because they're only in Fusion 16. So if you're not using Fusion 16, then it's not going to apply. You can use all the stuff that's in Fusion 9. All that stuff is all the stuff that's in Fusion inside of Resolve 16. I hope that makes sense. So if you're using Davinci Resolve with the Fusion tab, the Fusion 9 tools reference is going to work for you. That's what I'm saying. Okay, so how do we get that? It's not installed. There's no simple place to download it. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to blackmagicdesign.com/support. And now you can just click on the Davinci Resolve Fusion and Blackmagic, and you can scroll and scroll and scroll and scroll and scroll. So just make sure you're on the downloads page here, and you'll see all the latest updates. Here's 16, public beta 4. And from your web browser, just do a search and search on Fusion 9. That'll take us to the latest update, which is 9.0, and come down to the free version and install the version that's appropriate for your machine. It does allow you to play with it because it's a version of Fusion that is for free, just like Davinci Resolve. Right now, there's no Fusion 16 beta that's public. You have to have Studio. And the only way to use that is with one of the dongles. So once you have that installed, then what you're going to do is go into your applications menu where you'll find your Blackmagic Fusion 9, and in there is a Fusion 9 tool manual. So I'm going to open that up, and here's the Fusion 9 reference manual. So let me open this guy up here so we can see it. And as we scroll down here, we can get to all the different tools. So let's take a look at the 3D tools. And here's Bender 3D, so we can go to that. It tells you what that tool is for. So it takes a 3D scene as an input, outputs a modified 3D scene. Only the geometry is modified. Lights, cameras, or materials are passed through unaffected. And usually the icon gives you kind of an idea of what it's going to do. It'll tell you the different controls. Here's the controls tab, the bender type, bend, taper, twist, or shear, and it'll explain what all those different things are. And let's go back to the beginning here and find something else that we use a lot. Maybe the lights or materials. Let's do materials. And often you'll see people use things like Ward or Fong, and it's just trying to Google search that. You're not going to really come up with a lot. So let's check on Ward, and it'll tell you it's a illumination material that can be applied, and it takes the different inputs. Sometimes it'll tell you if there's an output, but these are all inputs on this one, and goes through, again, all the different features that are in here, describing exactly what they do. So this is a very, very handy reference for learning about how Fusion works. And you can kind of go through just at the very beginning and go through these, or just go through the whole list, and it actually is really good reading. So let's take a look at tracker tools. So we have our tracker, our planar transform, and our camera tracker. Let's look at planar tracker. We use that a lot. Now, some of these screens will be slightly different between the Fusion version and the Davinci Resolve version, but all the stuff is there. So it kind of not ignore these graphics, just understand that the graphics are just slightly different. So let's go ahead and I'm going to bring up a planar tracker. And I'll put this kind of next to it. So let's zoom in here. You can see most of the controls are all the same, but like here it's had track channel with red, green, blue, lumen custom. Over here in Resolve, it's a pull down menu. So while most of the stuff is pretty straightforward, some things have been changed a little. Here, operation mode, track, steady, corner pin, and stabilized. We go over here to a pull down menu with the same options. So yes, it will be a little different, but all the same stuff is there. It's just organized a little bit different. And this will go through, tell you what you need to do, any things that are required to make it work, how the output is. So very, very handy reference for learning about the different tools. Now, one thing that I did when I was learning Fusion is you can just go and say add tool, and you can add some favorites, which is nice. And I would just start going through these and try and figure out what they did. And there's so much that I'm not going to say I'll never use, but there's so much that I don't use today that it's can be a little intimidating when you're trying to figure some of this stuff out. So like I wanted to learn about trails. So let's see, I would open up the trails, and then I would go over to the tools reference, and and what was trails under, right? It was under effect. So I can go over to the tools reference, go to the effect tools, go to trails, and it says it's used to create a ghost-like after trail of the image. Okay? And then it will go through and explain the different features, pre-roll, restart, this time only, lock RGBA, the locks, the rotating, offset, scaling, blur sizing, the apply mode, and that's how I learned how to use the trails. So some of them have a tremendous amount of information, some of them are pretty simple, just depending on the tool. So kind of a fun thing for me to do is just go through here and add a new tool, and then go back and figure it out based on that tools reference. So not everything is in 3D. Some things are in 2D. And like here, I've got a 3D scene. And if I go and say, let's take this shape 3D and try and run it in the trails, it's not going to let me. So let's go back and kind of read up on what the tool says, see if there was something about it that explains that it's only in 3D, and actually it really doesn't. But because it's a image effect, it's more likely to be a 2D scene or a 2D effect. Well, there, after the render of 3D, I can drop the trails. So learning where they go, which things are 2D, which things are 3D. Usually anything that's 3D is simply going to be under 3D. Everything else is basically 2D, and it happens either after a render or in just a 2D scene. So I like playing with 3D, so I learned about the light, materials, the textures, the cubes, meshes, projectors, cameras, and all those things just by throwing one on here. Let's throw a ribbon 3D on here, and then I'll just add it to the scene and like, okay, well, it's supposed to be doing something and I'm not sure what. So then I go back to the tools reference and try and figure it out. So that's kind of my way of playing with how the different tools work. And I highly recommend it. I think Fusion is really, really fun to play with, and you will spend months, if not years, mastering everything that there is within Fusion. So let's talk about some of the simple things that we have here. We have your toolbar that has a lot of the basic effects, background, fast noise. Fast noise is to create a, well, hell, let's just do it. So if I look at fast noise, it just creates kind of a pattern, and you can adjust that. Detail, contrast, brightness, sizing, angles. And this can be used for all kinds of things: reflections, depth maps, specular highlights, anything that can take basically a black and white image and do something with it can be used with fast noise. So play around with it, learn what it does, and you'll have a lot of fun. Let's see, moving on, we have our Text Plus, our paint tools. Next section is color correction, curves, hues, brightness and contrast. The next section has to do with merging. So you have your merge control, booleans, matte control, resizing, and your transform, which is your moving. Next section is some shape tools: rectangle, ellipses, polygons, and B-splines. The next section starts you off with the particle emitter system. And then the next section is some 3D stuff: image planes, shapes, 3D text, merging 3D, which creates the 3D scene, a camera, your spotlight, and render. And really the reason why spotlight's in here is because it's the only one that casts shadows, so it's used quite a bit. So very often the most common things are going to be in here. In the grid here, where you have all your nodes, you can scale it, default scale. You can zoom in and out by holding the command, or I believe that's the control key on Windows, and scroll your mouse up and down. So I find that kind of handy, especially when you get these really huge node trees going on. Then up in the top, we have our two screens. Let's see, I'll just put something over there on the right. Each viewer has its own set of controls: your movement, rotation, scaling, your wipe views, your view percent. So I can go like 400 and zoom in, or I can say fit, which fits it to the viewer. Your region of interest. That's when you're doing some pretty heavy duty effects, and you kind of want to optimize the scene by just looking at one section of the screen. The region of interest will only render that section. You have your color controls: red, green, blue, and alpha. Some grid controls here: single or dual screen. And then a lot of the same stuff duplicated on the other screen. And you can zoom in and out. Now I'm using a Mac, so it's a little bit different than on Windows. On a Mac, I can hold down Command and scroll up and down to zoom in and out, or Shift and scrolling to kind of rotate everything in 3D space. So that's kind of handy. We'll move along to the top here. We got our spline tool, which is used to smooth out keyframes, the keyframing tool, metadata, and our inspector, which we can turn on and off. You're going to always have the inspector on when you're working in Fusion. I mean, there's just so much stuff in there. And everything has expandable sections here to open up, very much like the inspector on the Resolve side. So definitely play around with Fusion. If you have questions or you want to know how to do something in it, be sure and comment, and I'll do videos specific to the things that people are asking for. And a bunch of people have asked for a more basic getting started and how to learn about the tools, so that's where this video came from. And I hope you enjoy it, because I really enjoy playing with Fusion. I think it's a blast. I never got into After Effects. I just didn't like how it was structured. And once I understood this node tree and how this works, I was hooked. I think it's far easier to use than the different layers and things that you have in After Effects. So for me, this was much easier to work with than After Effects, and it is stupid powerful. There's so much you can do. I mean, just look at the list of tools that are available, and you can see that it's a very, very powerful system. And things like the particle system, I mean, you can really get crazy with it. Let me show you a quick example here. If I'm going to go to my effects library, which is the same as right-clicking or shift space to bring it up, but under doing it from the effects library, I can get really more detail into the different sections and see them all in here. Now, one thing that's cool about here is under tools, you also have templates. So I'm going to go to particles and let's just throw a lava in here. And it does everything needed to create a lava effect and usually ends with a render or a camera. So I'm just going to throw that over on viewer 2 and I'll hit play. And we can see what that does. And now this allows us to kind of go through and figure out how different effects were created by looking at a lot of these different templates that are here. And then we can just add those to our scene in different ways. Let's take a look at, glitter's kind of a fun one. Now, sometimes they're going to show up in this box like this. And what this is a fusion group. Now, to open it, double click on it. And there it is. It shows everything that was done in this group. So I'm going to take this last piece here, hit 2, so it's over in my view window, and I can see what this particular one does. And if I like that, then I can add it to my scene. And I can just click on it to make it go away, or to close it anyway. Or I can grab this, and I can just move it by grabbing anywhere on the top, close it, or hit delete to get rid of it. So another one that I used a lot was Steam. So let's move that over there, and we'll start playing it. And we can see what the Steam does. So let's zoom in here a little bit. And what does it do? It creates a Steam effect. So modifying this to fit whatever other project you're working on, there's your Steam effect. If you want something a little smokier, let's do that one. And let's fit this to the frame. And it's more of a column that comes up and expands. So based on how you want different things to look, you can definitely try some of these different templates. I think they're great for explaining how things work. So let me, there we go. There's the matrix effect. And we can open it up and see, oh, they used text. So pretty interesting the way they did that. You could have done symbols or something else to make that work. And how about a portal spawn point? Let's take a look at that guy. We'll open that one up, and you don't know what this is because it was named. You can go on any of these, and if they have the 2 dots underneath, just hit 1 or 2 to throw it up in a window so you can see what it does. So here they've created these different rings that go into this merge. They've got an ellipse with fast noise to create kind of a random effect going into a P emitter, going into a renderer, and into the merge. And they've got another P emitter down here. But let's take a look. Let's see what this thing does. All right, that's kind of cool. Kind of a transporter effect. I did my own before, if you saw that, but this is kind of a different one that has little dots in it as well as these lines. So this could easily be used for a Star Trek transporter effect. So this is how I went about learning Fusion. I hope this is some good information for you to get started on your journey with Fusion. Well, I hope you enjoyed that little dive into Fusion. I'd love to see what some of you guys are doing with Fusion. It can do all kinds of stuff from simple titles to 3D graphics to visual compositing. I mean, just about anything you can think of, you can do within Fusion. If it can be done in After Effects, it can be done in Fusion. So if you've done something really cool with Fusion, leave a link in the description below. So like, subscribe, check that bell icon to get notified whenever we do a new video, and be sure and check out the website at filmmakercentral.com. Link right here in the description. Check it out. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you later. Bye-bye.